Hello, I'm TonyTCB, but you can call me jimmybob. Software comes in many shapes and sizes, especially tools used to create, like image editing software, video editing, physics simulations, macros, software that interacts with other programs. People use these different programs, such as Blender, Adobe Premiere, Unreal Engine, Autodesk Maya, ClickTeam Fusion, Houdini, Reaper, etc. Programs are used to create content of all kinds, like images, games, or even films.
Where are you going, Marcus? The car's this way. Hurry! What the heck?
Hands up, WPD, you're under arrest.
There has been some evidence that not all of these tools can be trusted for personal or even commercial projects, with issues ranging from sudden license changes and hidden fees to invasive data collection, discontinued features, even disruptive or broken updates. If we cannot trust our tools, can we even trust ourselves? The answer is yes, and our interests are actually the key to addressing this. And the conflict between the toolmaker's interests and our interests is actually the problem itself. Across the internet, people create stuff of different genres of media. We can arrange this media into 4 groups: images, video, audio, and interactables like games and apps. Each of these groups has a genre of program associated with it, namely image editing software, video editing software, audio manipulation tools, and music production, and physics engines, and more broadly app design software and game engines. There are many different programs that exist for each genre. Image editing alone has Paint.net, Inkscape, Adobe Photoshop, GIMP, Affinity Photo. Video editing has its own list: OpenShot, Adobe Premiere, Olive Video Editor, and others. Game engines are namely the Godot engine, Unity, Unreal Engine, Bevy, RPG Maker, etc. Audio, music, and specific game and app design have their own programs too. Point is, variety is the game here. Lots of programs for your use case, and many tools are built to have a very broad use case, especially for tools that support plugins. When it comes to game engines, for example, the Godot engine, open source, and Unity, closed source, both have very broad versatility, and have their own built-in plugin systems. We've been using these words, open source, closed source, like there's no problem. But what are these terms and what makes them important? Typically, when you download a program, which is a file or set of files, you then run the program, which is itself a piece of software, and it fulfills its function. But there is a lot more to it than that. These programs are almost never programmed perfectly, so they receive bug fixes from the people who created the program or tool. Sometimes feature updates are regular, updates that add new functionality to these programs to help the users of the tool compete with other creators, and allow them to perform more varied tasks using said program. Take Autodesk Maya as an example. Maya receives regular updates to benefit their users, and to keep Maya a good option for creators who need a 3D modeling/animation software. If people find that they do not like how the software is being updated, they can usually choose not to upgrade. Usually. Having software that does not receive any more support or fixes or features is a big problem for those trying to create or finish a project using the software. And a lot of the time, the software itself is marketed towards those trying to stress test it for large productions. Switching software altogether can be even more difficult depending on the type of production. Maya supports 3D modeling and animation, so it's usually used for film and animation. That isn't something that can easily switch software mid-through production. You would need to convert files and recreate entire scenes from scratch for it to work properly. This makes updates and development of the software extensively important. But who is actually responsible for updating the software? The answer for Maya is the owners of Maya, Autodesk Incorporated. Autodesk has monopolistic control over the development of Maya by design, giving them extensive power over the users, consumers, of the software. This is not always an issue. The problem is when almost all software is organized this way. Almost all software is owned by some company or corporation that has full control over the product's development. Often this power does get abused in a way that directly harms the consumer, and everyone using or otherwise affected by the software. you may be asking, why can't the people using the software try to develop it themselves? Or write their own programs based on the source code that allow for conversion and usage of assets made with the software on their own terms? The answer is that defiance of the owners of the software is illegal, due to how copyright law is set up. The owners of Autodesk Maya, and of most programs that are not open source, do not allow for modification of the source code at all. This is proprietary software. They do this by putting in a terms of service that you are forced to agree to in order to use the software. To violate this terms of service is generally a breach of contract, and to modify the source code without permission, in most cases, is illegal and constitutes copyright infringement. This is a practice called forking. To fork a piece of software is to copy its code and use it to create your own version of it that you control. This allows people to make their software into what they actually want, rather than necessarily relying on the owners of the software and being at their whim. Unfortunately, for software whose owners do not license it open source, this practice is legally considered a violation of copyright law. The reason they have the ability to infringe upon how you use their software is because copyright law, and more broadly intellectual property law, grants anyone who makes a piece of software or artwork, or anything else that counts as a creative work, full rights over how that work is used and replicated, and full permission to sue anyone who uses it in any way they do not approve of, with some limitations for parody and transformative criticism. To use the software you paid for in a way the company or person who owns it disapproves of can result in legal trouble. Now, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I think copyright in this sense is completely nonsensical. Asking for others to credit you is one thing, but trying to limit how people use a product they paid for is unjustifiable. Copyright restrictions are argued for on the basis of personal property theft. If someone steals your birdhouse, they took it from you and deprived you of it. People being deprived of things is bad, and the way to avoid it is to let people make a claim over what they create or exchange with others. Then everyone is happy. This is a concept called scarcity. The scarcity of the good is what makes stealing it from others wrong. Digital products, like intellectual property, do not have this attribute whatsoever. If you copy someone's art and remix it, or use it for something else, it is not theft in the same way. Trying to claim credit for something someone else made is a form of dishonest marketing, and also steals from their reputation. But simply redistributing something, or redistributing your own modified version of it, does not deprive the author of anything. If you start making a bunch of money off of a straight-up pirated copy of their product, then you're kind of depriving them of their products. The problem is actual piracy usually involves products being distributed for free because the owner set the price too high for people, or people don't want to get scammed out of their money by streaming companies. So no, I don't think any of this makes sense. To restrict how someone uses a copy of something they already paid for when their actions hurt no one is unjustifiable. All it does is constitute aggression upon the consumer's free expression, and in no way does the consumer using a product as they wish constitute aggression or infringement upon whoever holds authorship over the product. Copyright law is usually justified by the protection of innovation, and it protects innovation by destroying competition. We already know innovation does not require any exclusivity of production. This is simply wrong. In fact, the opposite is true. All copyright law reinforces is profit motive, which is not equivalent to innovation. And does innovation rely upon it? We'll get to that later. Fair competition, on the other hand, is great for innovation, and simultaneously, the one thing copyright law actively fights against by handing development of software over to the exclusive ownership of large companies. Beyond competition, though, the ability for more people to help development and progress in general is fundamental to innovation. This is a quality that copyright actively rejects. Back in mid-September 2023, the people behind the Unity game engine, a 3D game engine responsible for very large titles with in-depth functionality, widely used for indie and mobile games as well, made a change announcing a new runtime fee. This new fee would charge developers for every install of their released game, with an exception for demos, beyond a certain threshold of revenue and installs. It very quickly turned into a complete marketing disaster, spawning widespread backlash across the internet for fears of it creating unpredictable and possibly retroactive costs for developers using the engine. Unity later went back on what they said, reversing their decisions after such negative feedback, but the damage was done. It all ended with a drop in the stock price, leadership changes in the company, the CEO stepping down, although it was still controlled by shareholders, layoffs, and a mass negative reaction from the game dev community as a whole. Game developers across the internet started moving their games to the open source Godot engine, and other engines too. It also led to me moving my sandbox game Bob Simulator to the Godot engine. More on Godot later. This disaster resulted from poor decisions in the company, as well as a clear outcome of what can happen when people with a profit motive have the ability to alter a contract binding for millions of people, who have no direct input in what is actually done. It also showed how easily IP and copyright law could be abused to hold an entire ecosystem of game development hostage, at the whim of executives and people who are just really bad at marketing decisions. In June 2024, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, FTC, filed a civil complaint against Adobe, accusing them of hiding early termination fees, pre-selecting plans that commit customers to year-long payments, and making it harder to cancel plans. A year later, Adobe made an update to their terms of service that reads, "Solely for the purpose of operating the services and software on your behalf, you grant us a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free license to use, reproduce, publicly display, distribute, modify, create derivative works based on, publicly perform, and translate the content." This resulted in its own public backlash, and after being accused of hiding the terms changes, they rewrote it to include sublicensing. They noted that you still technically own your cloud content, and then in a ploy to calm people down, they added example descriptions to each thing they gave themselves the right to do, swapping out translation with sublicense instead, putting translation into the example for derivative works. Note that, with this being the case, consumers are still not allowed to modify Adobe's software on their own. But Adobe can modify and distribute cloud content created with their service, or so the terms would have you believe. These terms of use are still active as of September 2025. Around April 2021, Muse Group acquired the Audacity trademark and gained control of the project's official distribution channels. Audacity is an open-source audio manipulation software. While being open source, the acquisition meant the official and most widely used places where Audacity's software is distributed online became under the private ownership of the Muse Group and was no longer community controlled. The software was still officially open source, but soon after, a drafted privacy notice and proposals to implement various kinds of telemetry caused a community backlash in July 2021. Since the software was fully open source, though, people copied the code and made their own fork of the software to develop on their own terms, leading to the creation of the open source Tenacity, a privacy-respecting fork of Audacity with open community-driven development. This last example shows that even software that allows for the modification and forking of the source code is susceptible to corruption by acquisition and shifts in management. Yet it also shows that open source software is one of the most useful tools against such corruption as well. Open source software is software that exists under a license, allowing those who use it to modify and redistribute its source code as they see fit. Common FOSS, free and open source licenses, are the Creative Commons, MIT license, GPL, Apache license, and BSD. Now, much of the time when a closed source, privately developed program implements things their community does not like, it opens the doors to the use of open source alternatives. This has already been demonstrated. When the Unity game engine upset its user base with poorly thought out decisions, people flocked to the open source Godot engine as a FOSS alternative. The Godot engine is a 3D and 2D cross-platform game engine. It is entirely open source, distributed under the permissive MIT license, allowing users to modify and redistribute its source code freely. There are no restrictions on how you use the software. This is expressly laid out in the MIT license. Clearly, people, including me, love this open source software. Evident from the Godot Development Fund website, where currently they have generated €277,782 in one-time donations this year as well as €35,817 being earned as a monthly donation plan. This money is coming from people who willingly donate to a project they don't actually have to financially support. You can just use the engine and help develop it for free. All of this, along with the wonderful rise of the 3D modeling and animation software that is Blender, an extremely innovative and powerful software, shows that innovation does not require a private profit motive. Blender is open source and is one of the most widely used pieces of 3D modeling and animation software, rivaling the popularity of software like Autodesk Maya, which is proprietary and closed source. When it comes to Minecraft itself, as I talked about in my earlier video on why all features should be settings, the community would benefit from features long removed from the game, but those features will never be added back on a large scale due to Mojang's monopolistic control over Minecraft. There is an open source alternative to Minecraft, it's known as Minetest. Its mods and game modes are written in Lua, the game is very modular, and built to allow people to easily run their own servers. You can check out links to all of this if you're at all interested, in this video's description. Anyway, a few years ago, after acquiring Skype, Microsoft shut Skype down. If any of you are looking for a free, lightweight, non-corporate voice chat app, I made one. I was upset that Skype didn't exist. All I wanted was some sort of voice chat, but Discord was just too annoying to use because the people I wanted to voice chat didn't have an account. That and I'm not touching Microsoft Teams with a 10-foot pole. So I made my own voice chat app in the Godot engine. It's called BobbleVox, and it is free and open source. You can download it in the description if you're interested. You can host a call yourself and have others join you, and audio will be sent back and forth between you dynamically. I recommend using it to only call those on your Wi-Fi network for security reasons. I may look into making a version of it that utilizes encryption in the future. I think that in the future, copyright will eventually be weakened and possibly even abolished. At the very least, open source software will become more normalized, and many tools, such as the Godot engine, may become the default for consumers. Software governed by corporations is software that optimizes for rent, not for use. Thanks for watching! I'm still making my sandbox game named Bob Simulator, and right now I'm busy with its dimensions system. I'll showcase more later. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads.